Hello, YouTube. February 22nd, 2023. For this video, I have something more to do. It's time for me to get back into what I was saying in recent videos, as well as older videos about the psychology of all suffering and the psychology of all non-suffering that is also, but is actually through feeling, which is what we know to be pleasure, the positive alternative, as a way of existing. Even though feelings are paradoxes, as I've proven, talked about many times. Anyway, my point is, sorry about that. Sorry about the hesitation there. As I was saying, the point, what I want to do is try to keep this shorter, but basically what I'm going to go over is what a person has to do in order to have their highest defense in life. And I'm going to give all the psychological variables that I can name in this video off the top of my head that go into making this happen, and that must occur for you to be able to do this. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say this is also just out of my own selflessness. As I've said, I have sympathy and compassion for my fellow species, and I always have expressed that throughout the entirety of my channel, even though I had a rougher start at the beginning of my channel. But anyway, if you can't, because part of it's just, if you can't always, do the best job you can do, then at least give out the best you can for others to be able to let them do the best job they can do. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not able to do that I'm not doing the best I can do. I'm not saying that I'm not progressing, and I'm not saying that, not saying I have given up on life. It's actually quite the contrary, and if you watched, you may or may not know this, but if you watch my videos, I've been proving that it's actually quite the opposite. It's really more like humanity just has always been quitters in comparison to someone like me. But that's one of the main reasons why I have sympathy and compassion, amongst many other legitimate, rational reasons, of course. But at the end of the day, one of the most important things you have to do, I'm going to lay out some of the most, I've talked about, here's the thing, I've talked about these in standalone videos, I've talked about these in non-standalone videos, I've cross-referenced these. There's so much on this channel you can go through to reach the level of thinking where you can perform these actions. But I'm going to try to sum it up in a more clear, concise way in this video and off the top of my head, because I practiced this my entire life. Other people have done similar things. Okay, at the end of the day, what you have to do, it's really important, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen right away, because here's the thing, as I've said many times and proven many times on this channel, this world has always been plagued by brainwashing, and it's been so bad that the brainwashing has led people to believe they can just do anything. They can just make anything happen merely by desiring it to happen, and merely because they're imagining that it's happening, it must actually be happening to them when they are. But it's not how things work. It's never going to be how things work. And all that really is just obviously escapism. So it's not rational. At the end of the day, At the end of the day, you have to prioritize pleasure over everything else. And you have to put pleasure first. And that's going to be your best bet. And that's because pleasure, it gives you strength, it gives you power, it gives you rational thoughts. It motivates you to try harder. It gives you adrenaline, you could say. So it gives you a much, 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 much higher pain tolerance than you would without it. And but that's because not only does it just feel the way it does, but it's also because of the fact that it just quite literally, it's because of the implications of yourself feeling that way in relation to what isn't you. In the grand scheme of things, it's how useful that is to you. So whatever you do, that is a golden rule. That is a must do. You're not going to be able to do the other things I'm going to tell you to do. If you can't do that, at least do that. That's your top priority, is to get as much pleasure as you can, while also doing as much as you can to avoid as much pain as possible. That's going to make you objectively, no matter what happens, that's the only way you can hire your defense to the maximum degree you can hire it to. At least that's one of the requirements. The other requirement is that you do not make silly associations between things. And the reason people make very silly associations between things that don't really make sense, that do make sense, but are not practical, or significant in their own life, is because they are tricked by their own thinking and they're tricked by others' thinking at the same time. And that makes them be tricked by all kinds of different things that aren't even forms of thinking as well. So, and so what you have to do to counter that is you have to understand what is around you by learning how physical things work. I've given every bit of explanation you could ever ask for how to understand how physical things work and why it is that you must understand how things work in order to understand yourself, to even begin to understand yourself. If you don't understand what's external to you, you'll never understand yourself. So I've given all kinds of evidence and videos on that, but that's one of the other requirements. And last but not least, off the top of my head, I would say that you would also, it would follow that to do these things, you also must take your time as much as possible. No matter what happens, take your time and don't do anything in a rush, because everything is set up so that everything is already predetermined and preset. Has the entire existence, the entirety of existence just has preset conditions. It always has, so that it's only going to be worse if you rush, and it's only going to be more pleasurable if you take your time, but far worse if you rush, and much more painful. So those are some of the three most important requisites, you could say, that I can name off the top of my head for how to get through life despite the struggles, no matter how extreme they may be, or how extreme things are. Anyway, on top of that, I think there is one more I could name, and that just popped into my mind. After that, I think I'm just going to end the video off. But but lastly, I would say don't sugarcoat anything that is threatening your safety or your well-being. Don't play it off as a non-threat to you, and don't do that to try to act like you're in the position of control against it, because it always backfires. Because it always turns out that people do that against what they're actually not, like, invulnerable to. They always try to use this coping mechanism where they'll say, "Oh, I'm invincible to this threat, so I'm going to laugh it off. I'm going to pretend. I'm going to joke around with it, and I'm going to pretend that it can't actually phase my thinking, and it can't stop me from thinking the thoughts that I am thinking." That's very foolish, because if you do that, you'll never really know what you're up against. You'll just be automatically, robotically assuming and telling yourself that it's not a threat. But you won't even know that that's what you're doing either. You'll just be doing it. So that's just a lack of self-awareness. I can tell you from life experience that I've made those kinds of mistakes. Everybody has. I've proven that many times on this channel. So basically what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to be hardcore. Don't be afraid. And so it would follow that from, not sugarcoating things, you have to be hardcore. Instead of sugarcoating them, do whatever the inverse or reverse of that would be. But don't do it in such a way that it, makes you want to turn away from life, or turn away from these hardcore processes and procedures in life. Just use it as an advantage to gain more pain. To gain more pleasure and to lose more pain. And if you have to resort to making others lose pleasure and feel more pain to do that, by all means, go ahead and do it. Because I'll tell you right now, nobody has any desire except but to make that happen to you. So you should have no desire but to make that happen to anybody you come across. They are trying their very hardest constantly to make you lose pleasure and to feel more pain. And they'll resort to just about anything they can. They have the intelligence level to maintain awareness of in the moment. If you feel like you should not do that, to get through life, then that's just you on your own in a world full of people who feel like they should do that to get through life. Now, don't get me wrong, that people do make an extremely large amount of mistakes anyway, but I wouldn't over-rely on that, because even though they do, and that means you can be laid back about some things, it's still not going to solve every one of your problems, because they still do some things right, and when they do some things right, that is going to be against you automatically. So my point is, you have to have, you have to make it so that you have what it takes to not do whatever you have to do to make sure you don't sugarcoat what shouldn't be sugarcoated. And I really don't think there's almost anything that should be sugarcoated, because just about everything is corrupted and not really there for you, for your sole convenience. But the brainwashing is there, put out there, to make people believe that it is for their sole convenience, and that, people are your friends, or family is your friends, or all this is your friend, and this is your friend, and this is here to help you and to make you feel. No, it's all bullshit. It's all baloney. Okay, it's all baloney. Okay, I'm not the first to say that sort of thing about this. That there's all those videos on YouTube and all those movies and things in the media saying, don't trust so much what's in the media, don't trust so much what's said, actions speak louder than words. There's so many quotes and so many things said that are describing this, but because people are so pained constantly, they can't even figure out or connect the dots between what's been said about those sorts of things. I mean, they can, but not to the full degree that they can, only to a small, tiny little degree, and apply it to a few situations, and that's it. So, avoid pain at all costs. Prevent pain at all costs. Not just for yourself, but for others, because the more others feel it, the more likely you are to feel it, regardless of how much you already feel, regardless of how much you can avoid it. So one of the things you should do to protect yourself is protect others, because if you protect others, they'll become more rational. And if they become more rational, they can help you become more rational. So it's really more about how you use things. If you just want to stop people from, like tormenting you or prevent them from doing it, then you could take the common approach that I've exposed seemingly countless times on this channel already, which is to just resort to barbaric violence out of sheer rage, which it's not the best option. What you really should do is you really, really should just take your time and to always take your time and follow the steps I gave, amongst arguably a few other steps, and you'll see the magic happen, so to speak, because you just have to experiment with these things. It's a leap of faith, but not all faith is irrational. Some faith is very much rational, actually. In that, what I'm trying to say is, it'll be a leap of faith, but it'll be worth it because it'll be a rational leap of faith. It'll be a leap of faith that is there through you believing in a notion that is actually likely to be true and is based off of evidence. It is evidence-based and not just faith, merely belief-based. Major world religions are a lot of just belief-based theories and claims and notions. And so they won't really break these things down for you in the ways I did. They'll give like vague clues and hints to the things I've been saying on this channel, but vagueness isn't enough. It's just not enough, When people are in agony, they'll be needing. If a person is in agony, or when people are in agony, they're gonna need more than vague ideas presented to them. They're gonna need far more than that to understand things, because pain is so excruciatingly just debilitating to everything that the more of it you feel at once, the more your brain shuts down, and the more you shut down, and the worse your existence becomes. So that's why I said take your time to avoid the pain and avoid as much pain as possible. You don't want to end up one of those people that, is a suicidal maniac, even though that's, the vast majority of people. I don't say that jokingly. I don't say it, jokingly or anything. It's serious stuff. At the same time, I still think it's necessary in the grand scheme of things, because remember, at the end of the day, God's plan is built out of our plans, and our plans are built out of God's plans. So at the end of the day, it's really necessary for people to suffer and for there to be all this injustice, but you can rest assured that it'll all be, it'll all be fixed and compensated for in the end. There won't be an end of history, but I just say in the end, because what I'm trying to say is that eventually, after a lot of history, there will be a point to where all injustice is compensated for. But as I've explained in a recent video, it says right here, 1 day ago, 10 views. Don't just rely on what you were taught, rely on what you weren't taught. Explaining why it is that God, there is an objective justice and injustice, but it turns out that not only should justice happen, but injustice should also happen. And when we're talking about the should happen, it's not merely limited to justice. It also applies to injustice, but you could even say that'll always be the case. But here's the catch. I still do think, though, that even though they both should always exist, that doesn't mean they'll both always exist in the exact same way, in all of the exact same ways that they always have. So that's why I think that eventually there will come a point where where justice happens in the most literal sense, and it happens in imagination and in memory of past justices, whereas injustice will reach a point where it only happens in theory and imagination as a form of memory, but never any further as an actual most literal phenomenon. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's because they're just such different things that they're going to have to be. They're going to have very different levels of restrictions and freedoms in existence after a certain point, as opposed to the present and the past. So, but in the meantime, that's my advice. And you can use any of the things I've put out for the sole convenience of my fellow species to gain an upper hand and find make life become easier for yourself to escape more excruciating pain. So, because humanity has already expressed to themselves into existence enough that they just suffer and suffer and suffer. They've done it for all of history so far. Well, now you have someone like me putting out the things I have on this channel. Now's their chance, their golden chance, while it's still around, to use these things to your advantage while you still can. Um, there's no rational reason to not. So if you don't, that's completely because you have tricked yourself, you've fooled yourself, and you've also been fooled by God. And by the way, I've already talked about in great detail why it must be that we have all been fooled by God, and why um, God would God's creation would absolutely be fooled by God and tricked by God. Um, because again, for him to make his own plans happen, he'd absolutely have to trick his creation. He'd have to in fact, he'd have to actually trick his creation to make some of creation's plans happen. Not all of them, though. But But ultimately, I don't think that God is doing it just to be. I don't think God is evil. I don't think God is evil at all. But I also don't think that God um, thinks that his creation should only suffer, or that not only does he think that we should suffer, he also thinks we should feel pleasure. And if we should feel those things, then we actually do deserve those things. But at the same time, there's some things that we feel, or there's some things that some people feel that they do not deserve to feel, but they still feel them anyway. Now, why does God make that happen? Why does he let it happen? Because again, he needs to have a purpose of his own, other than what would be the alternative if he just merely gives he doesn't utilize his ability to create. He could have just made it so that pain never existed and all that exists is pleasure. Well, then that's a waste of his own abilities, I would say. Because, well, I mean, look, he could make it so that pleasure exists and pain exists, but he could make it so that happened, but one would be felt, but the other would never be felt. If he made it so that pleasure would be felt, but pain would never be felt, if that's how history went and he decided that was the case, then he would not be, prolonging history, in such a way that it would be, like catastrophic or chaotic. And if he did that, then he doesn't have his maximum purpose, because then he can't, he can't be as creative as possible with his ability to create and manipulate. And so he'd be wasting his opportunities to use his powers, which in a way would kind of be like, I guess, like wrong, because it's just like not, you know, it just would be wrong without there being any, you know, it's like it would be a wrongness that doesn't really need there to be. Um, it isn't like solely reliant on feelings or punishments or rewards to be wrong. It's just a different kind of wrong, I guess you could say. So I talked about that in that video right here, like I said, 10 views one day ago. But I've also talked about it in much older videos. Well, talked about similar ideas to that in older videos. But yeah. Anyway, that's about it for this video. Hope you enjoyed. Um, and good luck. Please do whatever you can to take it easy with what I said, and don't rush through what I said, because if you rush through it, you can never reap the benefits of it. But if you take your time with it, you can absolutely use it the ways I said for your own benefit, and to improve your life right away. There's no tricks involved. There's no like adverse tricks involved. It's not going to backfire on you, is what I'm trying to say. And you can also use it to help others you want to help in your life, or even who are not in your life, to such a degree that it can actually come back to you and help benefit you. You can use this just any number of ways. You can use those things any number of ways to improve your life. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please like, share, subscribe. Goodbye.